Great. We're going to be coming back in here. I know some of you are still quizzing, and that's A-okay. This next part, Mark's going to walk us through a little bit of the visual sheet. Now, I know you're asking a question. Jerry, you didn't talk about the content box. Yes, we are going to talk about the content box at the end of both sheets. So we're really thinking right now inside of those performance areas of how the performers are doing. I mean, there's a component of what in there, but we focused on the ensemble, the woodwind, the brass, and the percussion. Now we're going to focus on the visual performers, both as an individual and as an ensemble. And then we're going to pause for a second and kind of shift back to music content and into visual content as we wrap up the hour here. Okay, so I'll let Mark take it away, but here's a little bit. Ben, if you wouldn't mind putting up the slide of the front and the back of the sheet so everybody can see that.
Well, it's hard to see, isn't it? Hard for my eyes to see that too. We'll cover each of these. The sheet is, of course, divided into the individual movement and then the ensemble movement. Contents on the bottom. So again, I want to reiterate this: the statement made earlier. There's no official marching style in the state of Texas, and again, it's whatever adventure we choose, we're going to try to go down that pathway. Focusing on individual, I know sometimes this can be a little intimidating. When we put the sheets together, they were designed, early aughts, and marching was a big word that was said a lot, and we had the word visual sometimes, but we really wanted to expand the vocabulary of this, and then body movement. Overall movement is real important. Marching is a component, and of course we also know choreography is used, understanding terminology. I want to challenge you before now, and when you judge in October, just Google basic ballet terms, basic movement terms, just to kind of have those. And many times you can go to YouTube and there'll be a brief example of it. Not that you just need to spout them off, but if you can say, hey, more than the thing where you go down lower on the ground rather than saying, hey, it's a plie, or you could even come up with a verb for it or something, but just come up with something you can. I know that's a little intimidating with expanding vocabularies to make that happen. The sheets are set up exactly the same. They go from the same boxes at the top of each one of them, always consistently, usually, sometimes and rarely. And then again, focusing on the placemat on the back of that, I'm going through some key questions there. To what degree did the performance demonstrate a refined sense of achievement with regard to form and control in intervallic relationships? Being able to get the depth of the training is really clear. A term I like to use a lot, and it keeps in my mind, do the students look trained? And also, we're talking not just about color guard members, are we? We're talking about all performers on the field. It's the battery percussion section, it's the woodwinds, the brass, and of course the color guard are extremely visual to make that happen. A refined sense of rhythmic precision and timing with regard to movement. Can they keep their the pulse that's happening? Are they able to execute this little leap that happens across the field? Can they move their feet across the field? Individually. Of course, there's easy to get comparisons, and that's, of course, more in the ensemble part of it. A clearly communicated style of motion from performer to performer. And again, you're asking these key questions. Is it always happening? Is it consistently happening? Some things you'll notice of like, wow, that person obviously is a stronger senior because they're moving right there. This person just looks younger. It looks like they're really struggling. Well, it's our job as teachers to be able to kind of make that happen. Of course, when now the adjudicators, you're seeing a trained ensemble where those little nuances have been figured out, and we're having the younger students rise to the older students. A statement that was discussed a lot was a sense of poise, presence, and communication throughout the performance. Later on, we use the word professionalism. So sometimes that gets to be where we're, like, what does that mean? That could be a subjective term, but we felt it was important that it made the sheet. Sense of poise and presence. Jerry, what comes to mind when you think about that?
Well, first off, I want to say to poise, presence, and communication, that's not on the Regent sheet. It was, right. And purposefully, and Mark chaired that committee, we talked about that on the Regent sheet, and we said, no, that's an area thing. What I'm looking for is not only do the performers recover when a mistake happens, but also just think about when they're in moments of transition. We all have the moment where the woodwinds either march or scatter to the backfield after a feature or something like that. How do they hold themselves in the moments when they're not on the stage, when they're not the focused element? Right. Are they still really important? Do they still have a sense of character? If the show is Edgar Allan Poe and The Raven, does it still have a sense of melancholy to it? If the show is this big celebration moment, do they still have that on their face even when they're not the center stage performer? That presence, that level of communication, that sense of poise in the moment when a mistake happens, when whatnot goes wrong, like those, I think, are what really lift up the elite groups at area.
Absolutely. I give lots of credit for groups that recover well. I think that's a skill in itself. They not even just falling down, but there's maybe a drill set wasn't quite locked in, there was something that kind of happened, but then they make it up at the next drill set. And then to kind of reiterate your point, we don't have the luxury of being on a stage where the curtain is drawn to the side where they get to go off stage. You see this sometimes with members that are exchanging equipment, or like there's members that are coming up for different parts and they're a soloist. We can still see you. And we're still observing you, and you have to stay in character. Yes, there's certain things you have to maybe get another instrument, et cetera, but that can be done in a very professional way. So look into that. You will find there will be some groups that will be considered some of the top ones at your contest that will be able to do. They'll have that, I just call it the it factor. They kind of have this, they walk on the field with a certain level of, that they've got it, and they can live it up through the show.
Absolutely.
The final bullet point individual is successful effort to recover from errors, and we discussed that with recovery. So again, it's vocabulary. A group doesn't have to have everything on the field. The groups that do have it want to challenge you to recognize what they're doing, and that's pretty advanced, and they're doing something that's it's a more of a contemporary moving style, and then they go right into a traditional marching style. Think of the training that had to go on with that when they had to teach multiple sets of fundamentals. They had to talk about execution of that. So it's being able to credit that and be able to recognize it. And then, of course, just because they have it in the show doesn't mean all of a sudden they're the top group. To what extent to do it? Is it effective? Does it provide clarity? Does it provide support for what's happening? Is it effective for the moment? So being able to get those things underway.
So before we do, absolutely. So before we do ensemble movement, maybe we'll watch a little clip, kind of break this up a little bit, let you hear from a bunch of folks on it. So this clip is going to be Joni Perez and Matthew Rummel, and in it, they're talking a little bit about some of the different aspects of visual. They're going to touch on some individual, but they're also going to touch on some ensemble inside of this. But this will kind of bridge the gap between us talking with you a little bit of individual and ensemble. Let's go ahead and roll that clip for everybody.
Sure. I can get into like a lot of the nuts and bolts of what I feel would be a part of adjudicating in that area. And one of those is just, the students show a simple awareness and understanding of things like spacing between each other in the form as the form develops over time, right? Do they show an understanding of how the form should expand and contract and that such those things from set to set? Does a student maintain a consistent step size from the start to the finish of the phrase? And do they understand, what it means to travel in a straight line path or in a curved path, or if it's a follow the leader? It's just a basic understanding of what is the form that I'm in and what is my individual responsibility within that form and throughout a phrase. Things like maintaining upper and lower body control. Through various tempos, different step sizes, various directions, forward, backwards, slide. So you could go on and on about like the nuts and bolts of how that all affects, their control of form and interval as they move throughout the show.
And I think something that we're seeing a lot more of in the past few years is the layering of choreography on top of all of those elements as well. So it oftentimes is not the first thing that we think about as teachers, like what is their spacing as they're doing a dance phrase moving across. But once we start to get to the area sheet, and then eventually as you get to the stage sheet, what will set you apart is, are you able to do all of those things in your choreographic moments as well as just your straight marching and playing moments? And then on top of that, are you choreographing something while they're playing as well? And those that I think really achieve at a high level are the ones that are able to pay attention to, their body, the form, their interval, their control of the equipment, especially as you're starting to ask them to do more than just straight left, right marching.
Yeah, and being able to do things like that with your group and teaching them that kind of awareness and that level of detail through simultaneous responsibilities and demands, that's going to be one of the things that sets your group apart, from all of the others, is when you can look at a particular group and see that it's not just, okay, we're marching this set of drill here, but oh my goodness, there's this whole other, responsibility that they're having to have while they're doing XYZ to maintain that level of concentration and clarity and form and detail so that it's communicating clearly upstairs. Which
I think as a judge is where we get to the last bullet point of recovery, where that's important.
Right, and that goes with like the level of professionalism that you see on several parts of the sheet, and the poise, and how that energy is communicating upstairs through the individual level, and that the fact that a student can recover in a situation like that is a huge testament to the training that they've had and just the mental space that they're in when they're performing.
And then I think with regard to those last 4 bullet points of the precision and timing, demonstration of individual style, poise, presence, and communication. Those are important things, I think, to consider when you're judging, especially as you get towards the back half of the season, like being able to see that professionalism from those students and really take that into account of their ability as a performer and how that should really weigh heavily for you.
Well, and I think one of the major parts of what everybody needs to understand when they're looking at an individual caption on a sheet is students understand it and the judges understand it, directors understand that the individual contribution, the individual awareness, the unified approach from person to person is paramount to what you're going to get upstairs. So both, field and ensemble go hand in hand in that respect. And I think, that gets lost sometimes in translation. So whatever you can get your individuals to understand at that very fine level and to understand it at the same magnitude from concept to concept and from portion of show to portion of show is going to translate in a really effective way upstairs that's going to be engaging and it's going to communicate just really clearly.
Go ahead, Mr. McGahee.
Sure. I want to move ahead to the ensemble movement. If you have access to the sheets again, and when you get a chance to see them, I think you're going to see something unique here. It's the exact same topics are talked about.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, can you put the sheet up there for everybody? There you go.
There you go. Being able to move on to the ensemble portion, exact same terms, like it talks about a refined sense of achievement, precision in regard to timing, depth of training, some of the exact same things we were just talking about. Now it happens to be, of course, with the comparison to the other members of the ensemble, the uniformity that's happening, being able to see repetition, being able to see now a cohesive unit that creates that power of like, wow, now we have the intervals that are relation to, but also now the individual responsibilities, their relevance along the way. So important. A lot of times we, at the region level, that's all we kind of address. It's just kind of like, we talk about the forms and we talk about kind of a little bit about the marching style, but sometimes we get fixated on the intervals. Now we see it's just a portion of it, and you can now see, okay, the individuals that I were addressing earlier, that's why that form looks bumpy, is because we're arriving at different times. We're having people that are struggling with the actual technique that's been prescribed for them and achievement levels. Being able to put those together. Professionalism. That's the key word you'll see on here. Professionalism in all aspects of the presentation. Kind of ties in what we said earlier, but I remember that was one of the key words that we talked about, and what does that mean to you? And that's something where I think that try to really define, encapsulate it in what it happens in a judging environment. But anything with that one, Jerry?
No, I think that, again, when we go back to that professionalism aspect, so what is group professionalism? Yeah. That's where perhaps an error happens. I know we're about to talk about recovery, but perhaps an error happens where the group has to react. Yeah. Where it's an error made. I know we're going to talk about props in a little bit, but where a prop placement is done, where a rifle toss that's supposed to happen inside of something suddenly is 5 yards off or something like that, is, how does the group handle that? But then also, going back to what you were saying in terms of uniformity, I like to look where the group doesn't want me to look. You know what I mean? Like
secondary and tertiary. Yeah.
I view it like if you're getting your house inspected. Like if you're the guy selling your house, you're like, please don't look in every.
Don't look at the closet. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, if you're buying the house, you want them to look where I least expect them to look. You want them up there in the attic, moving the insulation around, looking at things. It's the very same thing. I think when we think about professionalism, and especially separating the top 5 or 6 groups at an area contest, I do want you to think about looking in every nook and cranny, which often means this is the brass feature that's going on over here. Don't look at that. What are the color guard members over here as they're transitioning from rifle to flag? How are they handling themselves as a rifle line as they transition to flag? Is it in character? Is it done professionally? Or are they scurrying and they're not thinking about their posture as they do those things? That sense of professionalism in terms of precision and uniformity, I think.
Right. Talking about color guard exchange or changing equipment. Sometimes it's the detail of we arrived in a ripple, and then all of a sudden we get our equipment there, and they still have the same character in their face, and they all of a sudden leave in a prescribed time. It's like that. I went, man, that's great that they went to that much detail for something that was happening on the back sideline.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that. A musical comment that kind of ties into the recovery part of it all. It happens where an electronic something doesn't trigger off at the right time. How does the group kind of respond out of that? Hopefully it's nothing catastrophic, but hopefully it's something where, hey, look, they can still all of a sudden arrive at the right tempo. And the show wasn't relying on it to make that happen. And sometimes, like, wow, that took a lot of professionalism for a group of students to be able to achieve that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And lastly on that, like I think about as we kind of work our way through the ensemble, it is what Mark said, it's sampling. So while sampling on the individual movement where you were looking at individuals going down the saxophone section, going through the tubas and watching them, sampling here might mean from a uniformity perspective or from a just kind of a professionalism perspective, looking at the flutes and just watching the flute section march as a unit, watch the trumpets march as a unit, and how are they matching each other? Do their postures, how does their horn carriage look? So again, that's something that is going back into the individual but pulling it forward into the ensemble and just kind of showing that relationship that the ensemble is comprised of a bunch of individuals.
Sure. It'd be neat to hear over time that you're even referencing that. I enjoyed watching the flutes perform. Trumpets had the exact same characteristics coming on there. Now all of a sudden low brass, you're having it's kind of like you have the same energy level as you are sampling. You're letting them know that, hey, I'm seeing this and here's what I'm looking for. You're not just calling out a student, hey, side 2, 35-yard line, you're missing this. You could address that moment. Again, don't dwell on it. Address it is what it is, and then kind of keep moving on to the next group after that.
Yeah,
I think the next topic we're going to cover is not only just the performers on the field, but I call it the furniture on the field. It's the props that we all are a big part of it. I guess it has to be something evaluated a little bit, and it does have its merit where we can't ignore it, but we have to give it some credit for the groups to do it. Again, it's not a requirement by any means, but it is something that can really, really put the finishing touches on a presentation.
Yeah, Ben, you can go back to our faces for a second, and we'll cue up this slide for you in just a second. But when we talk about props, one of the things that I often hear is directors say to me, "Oh, well, whoever has the most props is going to." And I don't think it's that. I think it's all about how you utilize the equipment and the things that you choose to bring onto the field that help further your theme. And we're going to talk about content here in a little bit. But when you choose to bring out a bunch of sofas or whatever that might be, a bunch of shapes, a bunch of triangles on the field, there's a challenge that goes with that too. Yes. That's not a freebie. It's not like, oh, you put stuff on the field, you get credit for it. And I do think maybe 20 years ago it did feel that way a little bit.
Right.
But I feel like now the expectation is you're interacting with that prop.
Yes.
It has a purpose. People are either moving it around on the field or people are referencing it throughout the productions. And so we asked this question of Joni Perez and Matthew Rummel. We said, tell us a little bit about props and, what are the challenges that you all think of when you choose to program something with a larger prop. And so let's roll that prop clip for everybody and let them kind of see a little bit of this.
So it goes further than just the performers transitioning from prop to prop or the color guard transitioning from onto the field and off to the field and then back on again. Those are things that we see constantly that do need to be attended to if you would like to get that ensemble toward the top half of the sheet, or to get your own ensemble to be able to get to the top half of the sheet is attending to all those odds and ends. But for sure, the performers that are moving around props, they're just as integral to the entire performance as the musicians on the field.
And then in terms of transitions, pauses in between movements and breaks, whether or not students are maintaining or if they're staying involved in the performance during those moments. If your color guard is having to have an equipment change and you can't really hide what they're doing with a prop or a flat or whatever, are they moving with a purpose? Are they moving in character? Is there still drill and form control and everything like that as they move into that? Or is it just a function of what's going on? Do they lose you from a performance standpoint or from an ensemble moment standpoint? Likewise, in between movements, how do you captivate your audience and engage your audience and have your students demonstrate that we are still performing for you, even though the show has stopped for a moment, right? Or there's a silence, or there's a dip in the energy, that there's this constant awareness of what the ensemble is supposed to be communicating in those times.
talk about that when your interaction, and then it gets us the motivation of having a prop on the field. Sometimes it's great that they are a backdrop and they are providing a setting. Sometimes some performances look like they ignore them, or in some ways they're an obstacle. Like, wow, that really impeded on what the drill form was doing, and it was placed in a way that's really awkward, or it was something that caused more interference. And it'd be great to see that it was interacted. It's thought out really well, and then, hey, let's take everyone over there and let's create a moment around it. It's a staging area, and it's something that creates something thematic. And when you see that, recognize it, and again, what was the training for the students to have to go in there, and like, wow, that was really slick how they put their instruments down, they did something visually, and then they were, one by one picked up their instruments again. I thought it was so thought out, and recognize it, talk about it, especially if it's done at a high level.
Yeah, and I love that Joni talked about when there's silence on the field, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like I think, and I feel like the trend nowadays is we're seeing less and less silence in
Yeah.
shows. Everybody's
That's right.
washing over those
Content.
spaces.
Content, yeah.
Right, because it is a little awkward. And your performers really have to elevate those moments. And so as an adjudicator, our role is to, kind of as we were saying earlier, you're an inspector. You're really going in and doing a good, strong analysis on everything you see, breaking down all of those small moments, and just diving as deep as you feel like you can in terms of where the individual and the ensemble movement are. And so we're gonna come back. We've got a visual exemplar for you in a little bit, but before we do, I want to dive into content for just a little bit. Why don't we go out of order a little bit and talk a little bit of visual content first, because we're going to come back to that visual exemplar here in a second. Before we do, mention one quick thing. In those quick links that you saw underneath, if you click on the little arrow that's next to UIL TMAA, or if you're watching it on a full screen, I have a guide that we asked Matthew to develop for us that is terminology and questions for color guard. Just like Mark was saying about the ballet terms, if you're a little unsure on those things, I think he did a great job of boiling it down into very simple language. How do they release the catch? How do they all catch it? Are they doing anything under it when it's in the air? Are things going around together? And from a content and a thematic perspective, does the color match what you expect it to be? Does the size of the work impact the size of the band sound? If it's a full 2D moment and all the flags are out, that makes sense. A full 2D moment with a single color guard performer, we kind of scratch our heads a little and we go like, oh, that's not, doesn't quite sit as well with me. So I just maybe want you to reference that sheet. And again, if you feel like the color guard thing is a little uncomfortable to you, if you feel like it's something that is maybe a little bit of a challenge to you, have that sheet referenced, read it, look at it, and just kind of reflect on that.
I think also to fight the stereotype we said of only addressing the battery percussion, like the drums are too loud, it would be, oh, look, that's a pretty flag. Well, you're addressing the equipment. You haven't addressed the students on the field again. Let's fight that stereotype, and like, well, not only have the terminology, wow, that was great. What a great moment the performers did, and then I recognize a cool body move underneath it that was show thematic along the way.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead. Ben's with us. Let's go ahead and roll that. There's a visual exemplar in there. This is going to be Jackie Gilly. This is state, gosh, now I can't remember if this is prelims or finals. It might be finals. This is Aledo High School, Joey Paul's group, and she's giving them some visual commentary as to the performance. This is, as I recall, kind of right after the intro of the show as they're getting into their opener. So this is pretty early on. You remember we talked impression analysis comparison. You can hear Jackie's moving from that impression mode a little bit into the analysis mode. You'll hear her. This is only about a minute long, but check out this one. Go ahead, Ben. Let's roll that clip.
Excellent use of the gesture arm by the color guard. Excellent job as we bring the full ensemble together. Excellent understanding of the shaping of that arm. And what a great job of staging the color guard around the band. And handling the responsibility so well with use of the body underneath the equipment. Same thing with the band, the visuals with the lower body. Thank you for the simultaneous responsibility here. Yes. Excellent job of visual musicality from the color guard. It just seems to stop one count earlier than that drum roll off. Excellent with the visuals we come across. Strong uniformity, including with the horn visual. Thank you.
So again,
she's great.
Jackie's one of the best. She's able to identify, especially with regard to the color guard, but also the band. She does a good job of saying what's done and how it's done. And you notice she's not using overly technical language.
Right.
I think she says with the color guard, good use of the gesture with the arm.
Right.
She doesn't
Very
use
broad term.
Yeah, and again, I don't want you to be afraid to say good use of the gesture with the arm. Good use of things like that. Those are, I think, incredibly valuable just in building what that is and
Right.
what we're moving toward.
Words that kind of resonate with me. First of all, she catches everything. She is great. She addressed that's really cool. That's thought out really well. This is a little robotic right here. In that term, it was, okay, you're doing that, and that would tie in, of course, to depth of training resulting in clear uniformity. It's not an overly negative term, but it kind of puts it kind of not in the always box, but it's probably in the consistently box is how I would kind of use that area. But recognizing along the way, she also paused at some great times, and then when she got there, and you could tell she was sampling. She didn't just fixate on the color guard. She was talking about the band proper, doing about different things, and then, of course, the ensemble, the holistic view. But again, a really great example, if you are judging visual, think about the pacing of what she says and I guess how she's using her narrative along the way.
Yeah, just really strong. So we're going to invest we've got about 20 minutes left before our returning judges, and I've seen a few of you check in, returning folks. Thank you. Feel free to say hi in the chat. We're going to do just a few minutes here on the content box. As I mentioned to you earlier, we skipped over content and music and content and that, and I've put, Ben, if we can put up for them on the screen the content box that's on the slide, and let's share a little bit of what we're thinking about here in terms of content. I'm going to read the music one, but in all honesty, the visual one and the music one, they don't really differ that much. They're complementary. They're a little bit of hand in hand. I'm going to not use the placemat, but I'll just read the front of the sheet. And it's coordination and effective use of all performing elements. And to pause, we'll just kind of pause after each one. The coordinate is everyone on the field involved in the moments, and as they're being involved, how is that taking shape? How is that impacting the performance and the production? I don't know. Any thoughts on just how do you evaluate that?
Well, and here's a really basic term. I think we all get it. They're choosing to use all the crayons in the crayon box, not just the red, yellow, and the blue over and over, the same thing. They're choosing to do that. Think about electronics. That's a whole new color palette. Think about, hey, with the woodwind group, I wanted to do this. Hey, and there's even variations. Hey, this is, it's a more of a pink-orange color, and they're coming up with different blends of ensembles, keeping a variety, how we would see a well-composed concert piece of music. They're thinking about some of the same parallels that go with that. So that's the area I would immediately go, that's more than just the same presentation over and over, the same group of people I keep seeing doing this, and it's a different combination. Oh, it's a variety of that one. It's a different range in her tessitura.
Yeah, and variety, I think, is key, is that every impact isn't visually an arc shape in perfect concert kind of setup with the color guard. But that we take some moments to make the audience scratch their head a little and go, oh, I didn't expect that, but that's really cool. How about the second one? The effective musical reinforcement of the visual, and then the visual version of this is the effective visual reinforcement of the music, is when the music is fast, does the visual also imbue that? When the music is slow, when the music is dense, does the visual complement that? And that's not to say that juxtaposition can't be utilized. You can still juxtapose and have two really different ideas and put things a little bit. I think when we did this session, and I don't know that I rolled this clip, but Jody Rhodes talked about if you're doing a show called Rhapsody in Blue and you bring out an orange flag.
Right.
I mean, if that's a juxtaposition that you
Makes
chose,
you think.
It does make me think as an audience member. And so just that effective reinforcement, though, how do those kind of go hand in hand? Any thoughts on that one?
As trained musicians and band directors, we all recognize this when we go to a movie that's real effective. Wow, that was a great soundtrack. And that's what this is. There's a movie that's on the field. Did the soundtrack really enhance it? And of course, conversely, the other way around. We have this great dynamic soundtrack, except there's a little bitty moment that happens with a color guard, or all of a sudden it was the drill form was kind of not exactly matching. So they think about it in those terms. When you are really moved at a movie that you get to watch, did all of a sudden the soundtrack and everything just come together at the right time? There was a reason it was thought out that way. That's the best marching shows do the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now these next two kind of partner together well, these next 2 bullet points, and that's the suitability of the music or visual content. Is it written did the staff write for the group that they have or the group they
Right.
wanted to have?
Right.
Did they write for the students and what they could perform? But then also, what is that frequency and the demand of the music while they're playing? We sometimes are hearing from groups, oh, the best groups are just standing still for all these moments, standing still. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean we're marching. We could be doing choreographic content.
Right.
We could be doing some other things. But inside of that, when you think through as an adjudicator, not only suitability but frequency, how do you get that sense that like maybe somebody's in over their head or vice versa? Maybe something's a little too easy.
We all know that groups are trying to have a competitive product. They're trying to have something that has levels of demand. Like, hey, we're going to feature key soloists, key ensemble, play a sophisticated piece of music. I go to the how. I go to every presentation that has this level of demand, or most of them, for instance, they're not being achieved, or they're being achieved usually. And so that's when I get this common theme of this is great, but there's not been a level of refinement, or it's the group they think they have in their mind versus the group that's really on the field. They just haven't trained them to be able to do that. They're maybe asking them to play too loudly, and they can't play fast enough to do it, for instance. But coming across with both areas, again, it's the achievement level that really tells me, hey, this is great. I see what you're trying to do. I hear what you're trying to do. But again, the level of refinement needs to be at a higher level to be considered in the conversation.
Yeah. That content with respect to challenge is very similar in terms of that bullet is how is the content challenging to the ensemble? We're going to see groups that are going to have written something that the performers by October the 22nd, by October the 29th aren't yet fulfilling. That doesn't mean they might not fulfill it by state if they were to advance, but those are things that we watch that arc of development. By the other one I want to talk about at the bottom, and this is one that I've had a few veteran judges say I want some more guidance on, continuity and flow. The way that I like to think about this is if we're, after our training today, if we're all going to go to dinner, there's a certain flow to us sitting down at the restaurant. The wait person comes to the table, they take our drink order, they come back with our drinks, they ask if we have questions about the menu, the entree, the appetizer comes out, there's a several minute gap. There are meals that we've all been to that flow really well, and then there are meals we've all been to that everybody's looking at their watch going, where is that
We have
entree?
been waiting a long time.
Right, and so I think that marching band shows are the very same way. There is an accepted flow and pace. Sometimes we end up waiting too long for a moment to set up, just like we wait too long for our entree. By the same, sometimes you're getting served so many things on top, you really can't even keep track of what you're being served at the same time.
Right.
And so how can we continue to dialogue with groups about continuity and flow?
Sure, and I think we should address it when it's done well. You want to give the audience a chance to applaud. You don't want to try to cram in so much content that it happens. And that doesn't mean you have to stop everything down. I think that has been a formula that's worked before. But it's okay to have a big moment arrives and we're there, and then we applaud, and then maybe it's a transitional, it's an outro moment, almost where there are soloists and the front ensemble are playing. The audience can still applaud, but it's a slow pan that takes us to the next movie scene, and it's appropriate. They know how to respond. Not that we don't want to hear that soloist, but it's obvious they've created this little ebb and flow of now we're going to go on this other journey that takes us to the other place. And just recognizing when groups have gone through that level of detail in their performance, trying to utilize every second to the best of their ability and give everyone a chance in the audience a chance to really contribute. It's not just being yelled at the whole time, but it's something where they can actually participate and get a chance to show the performers that, hey, we really, really are encouraged by you and we want to give it up for you.
Yeah, there's a story time to it.
Yeah.
There is that feeling like we're being drawn in by the ensemble. And so just something to think about inside of those content boxes. Again, they're very complementary of one another. And so many of you at Area are going to judge music prelims and visual in finals or vice versa. And so knowing that content box isn't really a reframe, instead you're just looking at it perhaps through a different lens, but both the visual and the music are hand in hand in that box. And so I thought we might check out one exemplar inside of this. For this one, I went to the great Nola Jones. This is her commentary for McCallum. This is also, I think, state prelims from 5A last year. This is their ballad. And so I think she has an opportunity to talk about how they're moving from the soloist into the ensemble inside of the ballad. So let's take a listen to Nola's clip. And this is really specifically focused just on the content of what's being offered here from the group. Go ahead, let's roll that clip.
challenge. So I want to be
lower body information softens this musical statement over on stage left. Yeah, and the restage for the woodwind was actually motivated by the way the saxophone solo evolved there. Technically, that was cool. Woodwinds, you have to sing. You're staged back there by the mirrors, and I think that's a really great staging opportunity for you. Lovely moment there between the metals and the woodwinds. What great coordination there. Yeah! Yeah, great moment in the Altissimo Register and how you turned everything backstage to make that happen.
Awesome. So
She's the best.
we get to
She's
hear
awesome.
a little bit of Noel, and you can see she's really carefully crossing visual music. I mean, she really kind of takes in the whole thing from the 30,000-foot view. Again, at area, we're still going to be in our silos, in our music and our visual silo, but that's not to say that one doesn't influence the other.
Right.
And how those moments set up, and that we can just be really, and I don't think we want to rewrite the shows for the groups. It's area. They've got at most a week and a
Right.
couple of days
It's
left. We're
done,
not there
yeah.
to rewrite, but just to say, like, this is a woodwinds you need to sing here. You know, woodwinds we need to make. Like, those are comments that you could take from prelims to finals
Right.
to your group in the parking lot
Yeah.
and say, hey, woodwinds, the judges are asking for more here. And we all know our kids have another level they can bring.
Sure, and like she recognized they were close to the back mirrors, that were close to the back of their form. Like she's recognizing that, commenting on that when you're going to go into that little world and swirling back around again. Hey, let's bring it out here musically. You're back behind the rest of the form.
Yeah.
It's really good.
So we're gonna take a break here in just a moment. Before we do, Ben, if you'll bring up this last quiz. This is for our new judges. If you're a returning judge, you do not need to take quiz 3. You're gonna take quizzes 4 and 5, though you are welcome to take quiz 3. I will absolutely score it for you if you want. But this is for our new judges. This is the last of your quizzes. Remember today for the quizzes, if you don't see the link or if you're not able to scan it on a duplicate device, inside of that link that I shared earlier, you will be able to find, it's right underneath where it says UIL TMAA Area Marching Band Judge Training. There's a set of links there, and there's one that says important links, and you'll find quiz number 3 linked right there.